All right, we have Jessica Mulein here to talk about the Revolution Network. This is the third CloutTrends video interview, or actually fourth CloutTrends video interview, and really excited to have you, Jessica. Maybe you can start with just telling us what the Revolution Network is and why you decided to start this project.
Hey, it's great to be here. The Revolution Network is kind of, it's a bunch of ideas that I've had over the last 20 years that have all rolled up into one giant project that's become the Revolution Network. The backbone of that is called BrightChain, and that is purely the block store aspect of it, although that has to have some reputation baked in order to be able to participate kind of with the rest of what I have in mind. But at least at the beginning, BrightChain is really just about getting data stored with expirations and trying to reduce some of the wastes inherent in the current blockchain and other storage solutions. But so that's the core, and then you've got on top of that, we'll have kind of a storage mega.com Dropbox kind of interface with a little bit more pizzazz. Actions like being able to have duress keys and stuff so that you can log in and send everything to the New York Times if you use the wrong key, or maybe if you don't log in for 6 months, things like that, all kinds of data actions. And then the other piece is really sort of more what you're expecting, I think, is 5x5 social is the name I had originally. And that has to do with giving each other 5 stars on, like say you're going to do a sale on eBay, or I'm going to do a job or something, like I'm going to sell you this thing and it's going to be worth 5 stars and you're going to like it. It'll be worth 5 stars. You're going to be a good consumer. I'm going to be a good seller. We'll give each other 5 stars. It'll be great. And so that's kind of like the going 5x5 sort of idea. And that's going to have kind of a Twitter-esque front end, I think, but with tagging. I think everything is really going to be very metadata tagging intensive. I think that's kind of critical. I think Tim Berners-Lee kind of saw that with the web and metadata, in web pages and things. And I think sort of identifying what all of our content is in terms of context is really important to being able to decide whether to keep it, things like that. So the Revolution Network really is kind of the sum of all these things, and then voting really is kind of the last piece of that. I think what I would call the Revolution Network's core anyway.
Yeah, so there's really a lot here, and I think maybe we can talk about why you saw the need for this. So I know you mentioned one thing, which was wastefulness in terms of other either storage solutions or blockchain networks. Maybe you can talk about if there's something else I missed, and what is all the waste, and how does the Revolution Network solve that?
Well, all the other blockchains that you know today are pretty much based around the idea of artificial scarcity in order to create something that is roughly digital equivalent to a scarce natural resource like gold. And so you have kind of an inherent amount of waste built into the system, even if you strip out all the mining. There's all this gas overhead and all these other things. The Revolution Network intends to be a lot more lightweight, getting rid of the waste in that area, and then also getting rid of the waste too in terms of storage. We have petabytes and petabytes of information. I don't remember what the statistic of how much the average user generates a day anymore, or a year, but we're always constantly generating data, and a lot of us have duplicate data. We all have copies of some logo or some program from Microsoft or whoever, and we've got all this duplicate data too, and it seems like there should be a storage solution that takes advantage of all of the different storage space available on the planet, lying around wasted on your desktop, on file servers everywhere, And kind of the goal is really to have this storage fabric available pretty much everywhere on the internet. And to send a message, all you have to do is give the message ID, and then it can go and pull either the whole block stream behind it, or whatever the message is. It could just be a simple announcement of some kind that blocks are available, or it could be a full stream of movies, or it's all pretty short bandwidth.
Yeah, so I remember, thinking about this in terms of whether everything is needed to either be duplicated or even like the longevity of it. So the last time we spoke, we talked about maybe there's the opportunity to say this data does not need to persist forever, and you could have a shorter storage window, or you could pay up front and ensure that that data does have posterity. So maybe you can tell us what the mechanisms are there, and why some data should live on and some data shouldn't.
Sure. Well, when you're storing stuff in the network, at the time of storage, you're going to try and guesstimate your use for the blocks. Is it something that you're going to use just for yourself? Is it something that you're going to share? Is it going to be consumed a lot? And those factors might help you decide what it's worth to pay to store the blocks. But you have something really important. BrightChain will guarantee you that it'll stay there forever. But most of the time, we don't need to keep everything. And so there is this mechanism built in where you have block revocation certificates and things. But also, there's each block has basically a minimum keep until at least time. And when you store it, you say, I want to make sure that this is available no less than 6 months. That's how long I for sure am going to need it. And it can always get renewed later. But you can either initiate that yourself and pay for it yourself, or the system may automatically extend your data if it's being consumed a lot. And that same process actually would be sort of giving you back some of the energy you paid to store it, because that content is being accessed.
Yeah, and some of the reading through the white paper, or the long paper, if you will, there's, for all the listeners, there's a short white paper, or a 1-pager, which is a 3-pager, and then, a little bit longer version. Those are all on Jessica's GitHub. We will post links to those. And, it looks like there's this notion, let's bring in the notion of reputation, which I think from reading the paper, it sounds like that can help determine how long data persists. Depending on whether it's maybe it's, frequency of access, or whether it's, deemed interesting or relevant, or do we want to kind of block this person or this data? Maybe you can talk a little bit about that relationship between reputation and how that determines data persistence.
Absolutely. Everything in this network is still very speculative. It's a research project. It's not totally developed. So something I say may change. But that being said, at least as far as I've conceived it at this point, the network is really trying to track energy. And energy is kind of an ephemeral thing. It's hard to kind of put your finger on, but it's stuff that you contribute to the network. It's real resources like storage and CPU, bandwidth, things like that. But it is also, your actual content and things which are a little less tangible other than the blocks that you store them in. But, sort of one way that we can tell whether or not that data is being consumed, and whether you're a good participant in the network is actually a fact by whether that data is being consumed. But, you look at like Parler, you could have somebody who is verified, who is saying all kinds of baloney stuff, and you have no ability to kind of gauge the reality of that information. And this is kind of where the social network end and the back end blend together. But at least at the back end of things, in terms of energy and reputation and your value, so to speak, in the network, right now, it's looking like they might all end up being kind of one thing, or at least a couple of very related things. But I was just trying to think of a good way to loop in Parler and Trump and all that stuff, because I got to thinking after we talked the other day, and I think it makes sense to have somebody in the network who is verified as totally bad. Basically, people are consuming the content and they're saying this is wrong, this is bad, and more people are doing that than are saying the other. And so ultimately, the person who's contributed that data, their reputation is going to keep sinking lower and lower into obscurity. And that may or may not impact how easily they can access the network. There is a proof of work mechanic that I want to incorporate somehow, but it is mainly intended to be kind of to slow down people messing with the API. I haven't decided if that'll be like directly tied math reputationally, but essentially the idea would be everybody who has a good reputation or a neutral reputation pretty much does no extra work. They can submit their data full speed, no problem. But somebody who has maybe been putting a ton of bad content into the network, either malicious content, malformed blocks, they're trying to change the code, they're trying to do something out of spec, or literally like misinformation and lies that have been downvoted and things. And hopefully, ideally, all of that stuff will start, counting against the person and making their data show up less to people, and hopefully actually get it deleted at some point. Although there may be the case made that some of it should be kept forever because it's so bad, as an example for maybe a court case or something. But do we need it forever? If it's related to a president, maybe. If it's not, probably not. So hopefully between sort of the network rewarding choosing your storage specifications well, you're really kind of speculating on the storage game. How much am I going to need? How much are people going to use it? And is it really worth it to store this thing? And hopefully for most stuff it'll be worth it to store, but there'll be kind of incentives to do better.
Yeah, and thinking more about the data storage when you're just storing maybe personal files and it's not about reputation as much, it's more you're paying to store that. What's the way that someone earns either credit on the network to be able to store that if there is not a native currency of the Revolution network or BrightChain?
Sure. Basically, as long as you don't run afoul of the rules of the network, you would be able to participate in the network eternally. It's not like BitClout where you're down to your last penny and all of a sudden you're muted. Your interaction with the network is really not limited in that way. But if you're putting in bad blocks or otherwise triggering alarms in some way, then your experience will probably get slowed down on purpose to keep you from messing everybody up. As far as like a coin or a reputation in that sense, you could bake that into any of the digital apps, really. I think at the core of it, the backbone is going to be tracking kind of the energy ins and outs of people. And when you write, a digital app for the network, maybe you'll be creating a coin of your own. There's things like Filecoin and stuff out there that you could host essentially on top of BrightChain. And so ideas like that are possible. There's all kinds of ideas of things we could do as far as doing more with the reputation aspect of things than kind of just whether they're submitting things like they're supposed to and whether people are accessing their content and liking it or not. We could definitely take it further and do actual coins on top of it. But the just to be clear, the back end itself it's intended to be monetarily free forever, so that you can't like get excluded from a vote because people don't like you. Just because we don't like Trump necessarily, at least for now, he still gets to vote until he's a felon. So it wouldn't impede your ability to interact with the network as long as you're at least following the rules.
Yeah, and I think this is something that ties into the conversation around other cryptocurrencies like that are proof of stake. Is one of the arguments against that is that it's really proof of wealth, in that, if you can only vote, based on your wealth, that's maybe not the way that networks should be, or that, there should be an alternative, which it sounds like BrightChain and the Revolution Network is. Maybe we can just walk through like a user use case. If they're participating and putting out content, is it possible that could be enough engagement to pay for all their storage of their movies or their photos? Is just posting good content enough for that? And maybe we can tie this into like a BitClout example. In BitClout, in theory, you could get diamonds, because your content is so good that you get enough BitClout to always participate on BitClout forever, just because you're getting rewarded for that. How does that compare to someone who's putting out good content and on the Revolution Network and wanting to still have pretty heavy duty storage needs?
I think some of that still to be determined, but I definitely think that there could be some sort of BitClout-like mechanisms there, in terms of encouragement at least, or that it might function kind of like you might be used to. But I think if you're talking about putting stuff out there, like Instagram type stuff, where it's movies and photos that are yours, but they're interesting to other people. It should be essentially very close to free to store stuff that gets used at least once. The goal is to make it cheap. I mean, it's supposed to be efficient. It's supposed to be kind of driving the price down, not up. And so I think it makes sense that it would be very inexpensive to participate and put yourself out there. The risk is low. In other words, it's not real money you're spending. And I think by just kind of signing in, getting involved, and putting a post or two, I suspect there's probably even going to be. I don't see why a brand new user shouldn't be able to come online and upload a terabyte, even though they have no, monetary assets. Maybe there's some kind of, spec or credit, storage that to get people started that lets you, sort of take a risk on the user and gives them a certain amount of, quota or whatever that's just kind of free. To incentivize things, but I'm not sure exactly how that'll work. It might well have to be something like that.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, because that's the way BitClout's working now. Is you come on and you get that initial small portion of clout, at least enough to post and message, and maybe even buy one or two creator coins, just to get users started. I think that's an interesting way to make sure that someone doesn't come and then leave right away because they don't have any essentially credit. Let's move into a little bit of the technical details around BrightChain and why it's different. So how did you come up with this? You knew that you wanted something more efficient. What was your thought process? Maybe you can tell the listeners a little bit about your background and why you have some experience here, and why your thoughts might also be different.
I have worked a lot of jobs over a lot of years. I got started in programming, as a kid in BASIC in like '86. So it's been a long road. And I got interested in blockchain stuff around, I think it was about 2008. Sort of the proof of work, Bitcoin beginnings. I'd have to check the math or check Wikipedia on the year on that, but right around there. And essentially, I did not keep up with blockchain development. I had a job, I had a family, I had a life, things going on, but I had all these ideas rattling around. And by then at work, I used to do defense contracting for Department of Defense, Department of Energy, through Iowa State, doing research grant solicitations and things. And with my employer there, we had created an online file system we called WebFS that was, it had ACLs for things that you could control, who could access what, and that was kind of its lock, stock, and trade, really. Was really fine-grained control over its access controls and that sort of thing. And you could zip up a directory and download it. And it was sort of before mega and those other things. So it sounds it sounds common now, but it wasn't then. And so that project had kind of stewed around my head, and I've got this proof of work stuff stewing around in my head, and I've gotten involved in so many things over the years that at some point I started writing some like proof of work throttle wrapper type stuff in JavaScript. Didn't really finish it, but the idea was basically the same kind of API throttle I'm talking about for BrightChain. So I've been dabbling with this stuff for a long time. I'm not sure actually what kicked off me writing BrightChain itself. It's been rewritten a few times in a few different languages. Every time I set out to do a new project, I always pick, bleeding edge something, whatever is available today that's, something new and fancy for me to learn. I take every project as kind of an opportunity to learn something. So I'll pick a new language, or I'll pick a new framework or something, and we'll go with it. And so BrightChain's on Visual Studio 2022 and .NET 6, which aren't quite out yet. It might inhibit some contributors at first. I think Rider technically works, so that's getting better as the EAP releases go on. But .NET 6 is going to be out really soon. People should be able to start helping with that. I think it'll be a good opportunity for people to get in and maybe shape something. With BitClout, it kind of appeared, and other than a few people who are really into it and know Go and all that stuff, I don't think they get too inspired to go and add things to BitClout. But I'm kind of hoping that with BrightChain we can get some interest and get some people involved early and shape some of these things. These questions you're asking are great questions that I want to make sure that we have the right math in the back end of it to make sure that these things happen the way that we hope.
Yeah, and we hope that some listeners will take interest in reach out and want to join the project. I think how are you thinking about timelines, and what are the pieces that you're working on right now, and what's something that you really think having someone with a different skill set would be helpful, and what is that skill set?
Sure. Well, phase one right now is really getting online to the point where we can get some people storing some files and making sure that they get into the network correctly, get out of the network correctly. None of the replication will be in there yet. The database will even probably possibly be reset at some point before we decide to lock it down and continue once we're sure the block format's the way we want it. And after probably one round of alpha testing, I think we'll do a reset and then and start actually keeping data around. But so for phase one, getting to that point with the unreplicated data set and people logging in and stuff, I've been basically refactoring for the last few days. I'm getting really close to having the transactional logic in the back end fixed and done. It's taken longer than I expected, but I think within a few days, there's a good chance that I'll be able to start having logins happening, and then maybe another few days to a week from there, I might actually bring it online for people. But again, it would be a super alpha tester experience. See if you can share a file to your friend type of thing.
Well, that's exciting, and I'm happy to be an alpha tester. I think this is something that's really exciting because not often do you get a chance to participate in a network so early. So I think that was one of the things that drew me into BitClout, and I think I've sort of been keeping my eyes open for early stage projects that aren't launched 3 months ago, 6 months ago. I'm looking for projects that have not even launched yet. So
yeah, well, this is definitely one. And while there isn't an incentive like there is in BitClout, where if you're in early, your money is worth more, but maybe we'll figure out some kind of a reward for early people. Since the core isn't monetary, it's hard to do that, but maybe you'll get bigger quotas, or I don't know. It's all kind of up for grabs at this point, and if there's something you want, this is the opportunity.
Yeah, I'll have to check and see how much storage needs I have at the moment. I think also just in terms of being able to shape a little bit of how the reputation mechanisms work, I think that's something that I have interest in. And I even again on BitClout have been looking into that with a project called Member Cache, and you can actually rate users almost like a 5 by 5 notion you mentioned, where you give them a score 1 to 5. I think that's all very interesting because then it's crowdsourcing that, and that's the whole point of the network is to handle that.
Absolutely.
Rather than using hard fixed rules or heuristics, you can let the network do the work. So anything else, Jessica, we haven't talked about on the Revolution Network or BrightChain, and how this all fits together, that you think is worth mentioning?
I think we've probably covered most of it, but I think we did not cover so much how, one difference with BrightChain is that it's not one chain. With most of the blockchains, you've got a kind of a linear sequence of things. Every new block is always on the end. And with BrightChain, it's really more like each segment of data is kind of its own chain. And so, you can host things like Bitcoin or like BitClout on the BrightNet block store, the Revolution Network. In the future, stuff like Filecoin, Member Cache, all that stuff should be able to be hosted on top of it, since it can be kind of a multi-chain system. And actually, within sort of a federation, BitClout doesn't really have federations. Each node is kind of its own little federation, really. And in BrightChain, you'd have a federation that's got a quorum of members who kind of safekeep the super private data and all the identity information that we can talk about.
I think one of the benefits of that is it sounds like that could help decentralize a lot more of the node action, right now, where you mentioned it's very centralized. It's just, a node is essentially running on one person's server. This could be a way to decentralize things like BitClout nodes, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And the goal is indeed decentralization. You want participants who are running the digital apps for you. You want the data triggers running somewhere. You want the indexing operations running somewhere. One of the things that I'm interested in researching is, since everything in the blockchain is fixed, and sort of at the time of storage, you can sort of pre-compute indexes and stuff like in a regular database. And so I'm hoping to do some cool latent semantic analysis type index building.
That sounds great. I know some folks have been really excited about BitClout having Postgres database in sync, and being able to do some different types of fast retrieval that they couldn't do otherwise, and even different layers of analytics that they're very competent in SQL, but not so much pulling right from the BitClout API. So I think that sounds great. I'm really excited. Yeah, let's have you back on for an update. I think for now we'll direct everyone to the white papers. I'll post a link to your link tree so folks can look at your other projects. You have a very impressive suite of things you work on, and so it's really impressive that you're able to keep up with all this.
Well, thanks. I try. I have a couple autoimmune diseases, and I'm always tired. But I get around to these projects. It's kind of like I work on music for a while, I work on a project for a while, and then I circle back around to one of the other things. So I get to it all eventually.
Well, that's great. Thank you so much for coming on, Jessica. I really appreciate it. And excited to have you back on, as hopefully some others take interest and you start forming a team around Revolution Network and BrightChain.
Definitely. I appreciate it.